What up, ladies and gentlemen? Check out this poll. Poll no-go is back. Mod streams are back. Let's go, dude. It's the first one in a while. I think over a month. So that's pretty cool. Hope you guys are doing well. I see Roller Skates in the chat. He's my man. Been a while since I've been streaming in his fucking time zone. But it's been a while since I've done a mod stream in general, so who can blame him? Yeah, the problem is I've just been so busy with a bunch of other stuff, right? So I haven't really... I've been working on HYDRA, but I haven't really streamed any of that development. So we're finally back. Tons of things have changed since the last mod stream. I've removed weapon and armor upgrades finally. That's definitely going to result in some small balance changes as a result, but pretty epic, pretty good stuff. As we jump into our actual work for the day, my sort of to-do list is isolated pretty well in this current patch, which nobody will be able to read because my language settings for Markdown are pretty shit, right? So I don't actually know how to fix that for the current theme that I'm running, because I would just make this text brighter. But I can't. So I will read to you what needs to be done, and you'll just have to keep that in the back of your head. So what we're working on today is obviously related to the AI. I've been monitoring their progress. I found recently that if we take a look over here, in the expand block, you'll notice there's a commented line. This commented line returned, like repeatedly idled in the expansion block if the probe count was above a certain amount. And this was my way of making sure that the AI didn't spend too many of its limited supply on workers back when supply was actually limited. That's no longer a thing, but it was not removed from the experience for quite a while. So now we'll finally see, like, 10 base AI and stuff. I saw the very first time I've seen 5 base Terran, they had double-digit nanite assemblies and defeated a Zerg with, like, basically nothing but Phobos and Centaurs and stuff. I posted an Imgur album in the recent addition to the Discord server, the Visual Pizza channel, which you can check out at your leisure. I guess I can also actually pop that open here. Imgur often fails to load on Ice Dragon for some reason, so I'll have to pop open my other browser. You can see here that some of the many nanite assemblies, right? At first, the Zerg were definitely winning. The Zerg were definitely ahead. Unfortunately, right now, we haven't extended the AI attack limit just yet. Iquare is implementing... He's doing his, like, 3rd or 4th try on this. It's so stupid because we have got to rely on Rust and A's. It's just such a brain-dead fucking language for game development. But at this point, we're finally getting closer and closer, right? As always, with everything working with Brood War, you expect it to be easier than it is, and then it never is. Here's a battlecruiser with 3 kills. Very important. But staring down the maw of quite a few different Zerg units. You can see the higher tier Terran units, the tier 3 Terran units, flying high and mighty over here. Ion cannon repelling the invaders and whatnot. We've got more Centaurs over here trying to pick up the pieces. And of course, there's even a cute little proxy Nidus canal that I saw. It was pretty cool. Other than that, we just have stuff like this. More skirmishes. One final assault by the Zerg, attempting to make things happen, but a pretty big morass, writhing mass of Zerg units, or Terran units rather, eventually invaded. I tried to fit as many Terran production structures into this shot as I could. You see 2 captaincies up here. You see a whopping 4 iron foundries, and of course the nanite assembly over there. But there were many, many more in there, believe it or not. And yeah, it's just a whole bunch of corpses. As we scroll a little bit further down, we see some apostles, see quite a few ground units mixed in here, all mostly captaincy units. And to that degree, the script worked pretty well. I think the Zerg would have defeated them much sooner if they could have used all of their units in their attack waves, which is why I'm not super satisfied with that result, but it's a step in the right direction. So a ton of good stuff coming out from the AI now. Again, 5 base for either players or for both players there in that 1v1. And as I commented in the HYDRA channel at the time, that was more supply in that 1v1 than I've seen in like Omega at the end of the Brood War campaign, for example, like any large campaign map. There's more supply at a 1v1 than any large campaign map. Just imagine that one. What's going on, Terra Dominion? Welcome. So yeah, I'm not unhappy about the way that things are going. But I do recognize there's a little bit more work to do before everything is good to go. One thing, for example, is that the Zerg definitely expand, depending on the build, a little bit too quickly, believe it or not. They are not super, like, conservative about it, obviously. And as a result, that can lead to some awkward exchanges here. Oh, you know what? Let me jump in here to my test map environment and I'll reset some of the preferences. This is another system I've been working on that I'll explain in a moment. That I have not implemented for the other races yet. I did do I put in the skeleton for the Protoss, but I haven't activated it. So one of the things that I've started to do is experiment with a preferences system. And this preferences system will be utilized even in melee environments. But map makers, scenario developers, will be able to set deaths in the triggers for units that they want to be preferred by the AI. It's not a zero-sum game. AI can just, in theory, they'll probably be building more of a unit that they prefer than a unit that they don't prefer of the same class or whatever. But crucially, it's not like I'm requesting less of a unit than I would have otherwise because it's not preferred. I'm requesting the same amount of that unit and just requesting more of the unit that is preferred, essentially. So it's not quite a zero-sum game. You'll probably see, especially as more bases get picked up and as the resources start to stockpile, you will probably see more of a unit that maybe you didn't prefer. Like, for example, we prefer savants over ghosts in this example. You probably would see ghosts if the covert ops were there. Which is also preferred here. It doesn't mean you'll never see med bays, and it doesn't mean you'll never see ghosts. It just means that when they have the available opportunity, they will invest more in one than the other. So, no, I've deliberately tried to make them expand more Balothal. The Zerg, that is. It's just that their side effect was that some builds that already had like 3 expos, like they say they have a natural and a third take in there. The delay between the third and the fourth is now too short, which led into some bad cases. It would lead to the Zerg essentially over-investing in expansions and then getting punished by the higher unit counts of their opponents, basically. So, what's up, Hoopy? How you doing? So yeah, ultimately this preference system is going to be the side effect, actually. So the initial reason that I've done it is now the side effect. It's now just a byproduct. Because as I was implementing the system, I realized it would actually be super useful for making the individual AI builds more interesting. So I will walk you through how I've set it up for the first Terran build that I've done. So as we see here, there's a couple of Boolean variables that check to see if any preference has been set in the triggers. And if that is false, they call a block that prefers, for example, Heracles over Madcaps, Shamans over Medics, Siege Tanks over Goliaths, Pazuzus over Penumbra, Munitions Bay, Salamander over Wyvern, Azazel over Science Vessel, and so on and so forth. You just sort of assume the rest of there. I've documented all of the preferences in the back end of this right side page over here, which again, you can't read because what is Notepad++ styling? And after that, they essentially just continue on as normal, right? So what this does is you can set a death to override this if you want, for example, this 2-fact mech, but that you want them to prefer Goliaths instead of tanks. You can set a Goliath death that will make it so that the siege tank death will not be set, and then you'll get the Goliath preference instead. Otherwise, everything will be unchanged. So map makers having more flexibility is originally that was why I was exploring the system. Then I realized it's actually super useful for builds to be a bit more interesting, a bit more unique, a bit more effective, and effectively different as the game progressed as well, as opposed to just being something initially. So for example, there's a build out there called Holy Ahmeds that Kian made that I've since revised pretty heavily. But the idea behind it is that it just spams firebats. Now, eventually it'll go into like Heracles in the late game and stuff like that. But one of the interesting aspects of it that we can do now that we couldn't do before is we can actually make it so that instead of having to write like Q Vulture Factory or Q Firebat Barracks or whatever, we can just make the AI naturally prefer those kinds of units. And I think that that's pretty powerful for telling that sort of story from a gameplay standpoint of what an AI wants to do. Of course, the best method of telling a story in one of these scenario maps or a campaign mission or something would be to write your own AI instead of relying on the HYDRA melee AI and the limited customization you can do. But it still helps, and this kind of system can be used. Its primary usage, in fact, is to just govern what the builds themselves are doing. So now if you want barracks spamming AI to utilize the barracks for Cyprians instead of firebats, and there is no build for that built in, you might be able to augment an existing build with a Cyprian death, and then they'll prefer those over firebats as an example. So you can also prefer Marines if you just want them to spam Marines like a lunatic. That is an option. So yeah. Well, I guess it depends on the race, Balethal, what they would get. The interesting aspect behind the AI and their unit compositions is I'm actually seeing a lot more out of at least the general AI so far. I'm seeing a lot wider of a breadth of units. And because of the way I've written it as well, I'm also seeing them pivot a little bit more towards those later game higher tier things, which is what you want. You want the AI to pivot towards higher tier production structures, higher tier units in their attack waves, assuming they have the money, the income necessary to put it together, to put it to good use, to actually deploy those structures. That is certainly the case. And that's, I kind of cheated a little bit by preferring captaincies and nadite assemblies over barracks and starports. That preference does account for, I think, a good reason, a good amount of why we don't see as many. Let me just make sure I didn't accidentally. Yeah, okay. So we're just going to get rid of those deaths so we can test the unaltered, unpreferred AI. That being said, the 2-fact mech build is the only one that currently has these in the build. Everything else will just be uniform. So that is another component as well. Ideally, at the end of the day, we could simplify the builds more and more by having a function that adds production structures based on income plus preferences or current money plus preferences. And then we just set the preferences based on the personality and the build, and that does it all for us. Like, the simpler we can make this, the better and more scalable it obviously is. And in that sense, you really only have to change a couple of preferences and maybe some delays or some order of operations in order to have a unique and more interesting composition of potential player bases or play styles. And I think that will definitely help quite a bit. Also, I finished my own Modstream less than an hour ago. I am proud of you, Dad. Excellent work. Are you still suffering through AoE 3? You've probably already said this on the server, but I don't remember. Another thing that's kind of interesting about this preference system is that it can allow me to go for something a lot more wacky and essentially add character to a build that currently doesn't really have that much character. Like when I see the Gen 12cc build, I don't know it's a Gen 12cc build just because they fast expoed. I mean, I guess that is something that I can literally understand based on that, but it's not something that immediately sticks out to me personally. So I'm also wondering what I build a barracks and then Q2 Marines. I don't remember who fucking wrote this. This is probably me, actually. But if the barracks still costs 1080 frames and I'm telling the AI to Q Marines from an unbuilt barracks, that's pretty embarrassing. I think a lot of those kinds of approximations probably got fucked around when I was messing around with stuff. Yeah, it's 1080. So this can just be removed. It's like clogging up the request limit for no reason. Or not requests in this case, but I think the AI will naturally be ordering Marines and stuff when the barracks are finished anyway. Particularly when this comes into play later on, which is fine. Although I'm not sure why we're only waiting 24 frames. Yeah, I would say I want to experiment with just getting rid of queues in the middle of the the build orders. I don't think it's particularly helpful in this case. Particularly since a lot of these queues are going to come in when the AI doesn't even have its structures finished. Something else that I've noticed so far is that when we take a look at some of the advanced Terran production structures, so I'm going to contrast the captaincy with the barracks, for example. It's a 1 armor and 500 HP increase. I probably want to keep the armor increase, but reduce significantly the HP increase. I'm thinking 1250 is more than enough for this structure. The one counterbalance is that it's 15 extra seconds to build. And that's a long time. I mean, that's an increase of a third over, like it's 1/3 longer because it's a third of the barracks, right? So, or whatever that equals out to be. It's probably 133% if I had to guess. Like, I guess we can look that up. Yeah, 1.33. So, as much as I like threes, that's a little bit much. So, maybe I drop the build time slightly. I'm okay if the build time is is the same, because the idea is the captaincy will withstand just from the extra armor. See, this is something that I didn't expect to come into play as much. I expected things like the battlecruiser to potentially be really powerful in the current iteration without upgrades if you're at a tech disadvantage, which is what I want in the first place. Like, I want you to be at a disadvantage if the only thing you have to fight battlecruisers are hydralisks or mutalisks. Like, you probably need almaxalisks. You probably need devourers or vithralisks, as they're now known. You probably need fucking Isthraloliths or something. Like, you need something to fight these guys, right? And Isthralolith, by the way, used to be called Defiler. Cringe name. Glad it's out. So you probably need some high-tech unit to answer the enemy's high-tech unit, which is better, in my opinion, than just being able to, like, change the combat effectiveness of your other unit. So it does make it so that your strategies do become a bit more reductive. But the thing is, I don't expect that, like, the cases that I saw today, where the AI had 5 bases of fully, like, mining for a short amount of time before they mined out some of them, that was what was necessary for the AI to mostly have tier 2, tier 3, in some cases tier 4 units, if you can count. Really, they're all tier 3, but, like, you know, he had some Phobos and some Penumbra and stuff walking around. And even then, there were so many Hydras and Zerglings and all this other shit that like it wasn't that easy for him to win. Like it did take quite a while for him to stack up enough units to do that. But it was quite thematic to see like capital ships and stuff flying over the Zerg bases and taking like 20 Hydras each or whatever, to actually throw down. Now, in an ideal world, the AI would have actually teched up a little bit more. The AI would have updated its abilities a bit more. I think it never built its matral nest, which is what unlocks matroleths, which used to be called queens. So that's something where I think that's probably one example where the AI just kind of bugged out in that case, unfortunately. But like, yeah, in an ideal world, you just wouldn't see goofy stuff like what I was just describing. And in an ideal world, you'd just see the AI tech up and then spend some of its budget on these like really early tier units. And the rest of its budget would be dedicated towards the higher tier units. And another component of this is if you're able to shut down your opponent's high priority, high tier production structures, then you've reduced their ability to use their high tier status, their science facility, right? Another component, I'm glad that didn't break everything. If at some point you just harass the economy of your opponent, then they can't afford these really expensive high tier units. And then it's fucked. So I think there's plenty of counterplay, despite the fact that in theory we are reducing the available options. It becomes more about how you use your units that you have and less about like just stacking upgrades that are no like inalienable advantages or whatever. That being said, I am still open to like reducing the armor and stuff of some of the high tier units to allow for these early tier units to have a bit more of a shot. But I don't see it as a huge deal right now. I think it's still something that you can, in theory, benefit from. I think maybe battlecruisers losing 1 armor to go down to 2 base armor since they have the +2 armor when facing their opponent thing with their passive. I think that's probably fair because right now they get 5 effective armor if they're facing their opponent. So dropping that down to 4 would make sense. At least I'm pretty sure it's +2, right? Yeah, +2 armor when facing their attackers. Either that or I can make it +1 armor instead. But I kind of like the idea of reducing their armor by half if you circumnavigate the unit, basically. I kind of like that idea because then it's reinforcing the mechanic of positional gameplay associated with it. So I think I will make that change right now, as a matter of fact. And then I'll also be dropping the HP a little bit of for example, the captaincy. Drop that down to 1250. We can check out the nanite assembly, which has 2k HP, by the way. Ridiculous. We'll give that 1500. And the iron foundry is also probably 1500 worthy. If we take a look at these two structures, they cost relatively similar amounts of net resources. Yeah, it's 350 in either case, so pretty much the same stuff. 60 seconds. This is where maybe I see an argument for reducing the train time of the build time of the captaincy. These tier 3 stuff, these tier 3 production structures being 60 seconds, I wouldn't want to necessarily make them take longer to build, particularly since I'm dropping their survivability a bit right now. But they should be longer to build than the captaincy. And so if that's my dynamic, then I have to reduce the captaincy's build time maybe by 5 or 10 seconds. So I'll think about that. That's not a change that I necessarily need to make right now. But just comparing the Iron Foundry of 1750 to the factory of 1250, in this case it's a 500 HP increase. I don't really know why starports have 1300 HP instead of 1250 HP, but you never know, man. So there can be another 3. Yeah, that's a fair point. I don't know why I didn't think of that myself. I feel like maybe I did I can probably just close this out right now. I'm pretty sure I renamed the, or the particle accelerator is, oh no, it is still in here, it's 200. Oh yeah. You can actually see this file on in the special bus, which I guess I'll throw a link to it in the chat here real quick. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Where is it? Current patch. I'll go ahead and throw it on YouTube as well, so everybody can click that. So this change is not actually implemented. It's still currently like a couple of frames or whatever. It's really small. This change only works on damage right now. We need to move the logic to be on weapon fire and ability cast. So neither of these changes are completely implemented, which is kind of a shit like thing for testing right now. That being said, we also need to change the way that this works entirely. We need to actually decloak the unit visibly and then recloak them as if they were being toggled in the same way as like a Wraith and a Ghost look. We need to do that for all the units, because just revealing a cloaked unit in the same way that it would be revealed if you detected it is really confusing for readability. And now that it's like a finite timer, like a very specific timer instead of just on attack for like a split second, we need to make sure that we're being very clear about the reads, I think. And yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't see really any major issues with that. So yeah, that's just something that I'm personally like. I definitely think that needs to happen with the cloaking thing. So I guess I could even add that as a goal here, so, or a general thing. So we'll say units now cloak and recloak. I'll say visibly. Affected units now visibly cloak and decloak and recloak. So we can just go ahead and push that change there. Update cloaking rules. And that's also something that we could even add to the website. For example, we can go in and well, I'm not going to bother doing this right now, but it is something that we can do later on. So yeah. Those are some of my initial thoughts. I like the renaming set of units is pretty funny. Yes, exactly. At a glance, you can see if a unit is decloaked. For example, if you pan over to a unit and you see a decloaked, permanently cloaked unit, then you know it just cast a spell, right? A little bit stranger for units that are cloaked by the Arbiter's Shroud of Adun passive, the cloaking field, but that is still possible, I think. Because if you see an Arbiter nearby, then maybe you know, like, oh, this unit was just in combat or whatever. It would be a lot easier to lame hard code the changes in that I'm talking about if it were just the permanently cloaked units. But obviously, we all know that's not how we roll around here. We got to make these mechanics consistent and able to be passed on to any unit possible. So, all right, so we will jump in here and document our changes. Say battle cruiser. Armor now 2 and 3. This is captaincy. HP now 1500 from, was it 1750 or something? Oh no, I think I gave it 1250 from 1500. And then we'll say iron foundry, comma, nanite assembly. HP at now 1500 from 2000. And then I'll just add a note here. Build time now 50 from 60. Speculative. Not sure if I'll actually add that, so I'll leave that note there. So yeah, I think that should be good. No problems there. Oop. I have to rename drone. And then for Protoss, I have to rename Reaver. You know what's really funny is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 out of 10 robotics branch units are new. That's pretty psychotic. I guess Arbiter is pretty shit. Carrier's pretty shit. Interceptor's pretty shit. Probe is pretty shit. So we've got Probe, Reaver, Carrier, Interceptor, Arbiter. So yeah, 5 units. Dragoon feels really stupid and out of place when you know what a Dragoon actually is, because it's like a horse rider, a horse gunman, horse-mounted gunman. But it's just iconic, right? So it's such a... It's not even like classy or anything. It's not even like, you know, emblematic. Yeah, I was thinking of calling it the Minotaur because that's what I've called its weapon, like Minotaur battery or whatever. And I think that might even be what it's classed as in the lore or something, is like Minotaur class battlecruiser. I think that's a way more thematic name than battlecruiser. So that is still on the cards. There's a couple of other stuff, like Dropship needs to be renamed. I think SCV is pretty shit, but it's also like kind of iconic in the same sense as the Dragoon. And it's not like an action verb name or something. So even though it's not very creative, as heretical as it sounds, I think Ahmed might need to go as well, like Firebat. I guess it's also not like an action verb name, but it also feels super out of place like Dragoon. So I don't know. Not sure about that one. Siege Tank is like battlecruiser, pretty stupid. Science Vessel's terrible. So yeah, I think for Terran, it's like... It would be... Who do we have? I don't know, I'll probably leave Firebat. Marine's also kind of boring. But it's not an action verb. It's like not high profile or whatever. So we'll say like X, formerly siege tank. We'll say Minotaur, formerly battle cruiser. Obviously, drop ship. And then something for science vessel. Yeah, carrier scout shuttle is pretty dreadful, right? What do we say? Reaver, X, formerly Arbiter. Whoa! Oh, I created a new virtual desktop with that hotkey. I didn't even know that existed. All right. I think we can probably just go into the folder here and then find in files. We have to match case. Okay. This is for the website. Just gotta pull the changes to the website, of course. I'm pretty happy with how the unit names came out, though. For Zerg, I mean. I think that works out pretty well. Iron Foundry. Okay. Okay, so I think that ends up working out much better, personally. Yeah, as far as the names go for everything else, I'm not 100% sure. I'm just making sure all the links stuck together here. I'm trying to think about what a sort of mythological creature a siege tank would personify. And I'm definitely thinking of something that's like, I don't know. I almost think Salamander would be pretty epic for a siege tank, even though it's not really related to fire. But obviously, I'm using that for a ship, right? So I can't use that. I'm also wondering if the siege tank should even be related to mythology. We've got some units that aren't related to mythology, like Madcap, for example, or Savant, right? Azazel is an angel in biblical mythology. Wyvern is kind of mythological, right? It's like a bit more pop culture, I guess, but same for Gorgons. Wendigo is obviously mythological. Southpaw is another example of a unit that's not really related to that sort of thing, right? But I don't really want to go for like a basic unit or anything like that, or like a basic animal for something as fundamental as the siege tank. So I really like like part of the problem is I really like the name Paladin for the siege tank as well, because it's like this heavy blow, right? It's very, very, very powerful word, the Paladin. But I also think the current name, the current Paladin, is perfectly named as well. So I don't really have a problem with that. But it can't be that. But yeah, I think we'll just come back to that a little bit later. I played around with the idea of naming the science vessel after like a famous explorer, like obviously Magellan. That's what they did there. Galileo comes to mind. But I think it's weird to name a unit after a name, a proper noun like that. You more so want like an actual word, like that describes something a little bit more common than just one guy's name or whatever, right? Terran Copernicus. What's up, Kian? That might not actually be that bad because Copernicus almost like sounds a bit more like something you could be using as a mass noun in a way. What's up, Iron Torch? Welcome. So yeah, that is almost something that could work. I kind of like that idea, TBH. Ooh, Vulcan. My problem is that vulture already exists and it's the same first symbol or same first syllable. Otherwise, I would definitely be like considering that. And Hephaestus is just super like, it's not very punchy of a name, even though it does fit. Like Hephaestus is like some god of fire or something, right? Oh, I actually already looked him up. No, he's the this is the metal worker guy. Yeah, metallurgy, fire. I was actually looking up Hephaestus a while back for the purpose of I was considering that name when I was researching like mythological things that are related to fire and stuff. Ooh, and you know, like a really epic infantry unit would be called like the Terran Olympian or something. You know what I mean? That could be pretty cool. We're coming up with names to rename the science vessel, the siege tank, the dropship. These names that are very uninspired, that are literally just like, oh yes, a vessel of science, a tank of siege. You know, like they're just prescriptive instead of descriptive. If that makes any sense, like they're telling you exactly what the unit is in like leaving no room for like a sense of scale or grandeur or flair or any sort of unit personality. Like the personality of the siege tank is mostly just like the redneck driver, right? Who's just like super self-confident. But you could there's no connection to it being a siege tank, right? Not really. So yeah, the Olympian is just a super buff, roided out man. He walks around like this. I could see that. I don't even know how much of that you could see, but you know what I mean. Walking around like an idiot, basically. But yeah, Terran Olympian. I've actually got that means I've got two good names for Terran high tier Terran infantry because the other one was the Autocrat. Although I guess Autocrat is not necessarily strictly infantry, but Olympian is like legendary man or whatever. So the Andoranus. That's a deep cut from some of those custom campaigns we played in Brood War. I do like a lot of the Greek mythology names and stuff. That's something that is a little bit like I always look to that for Terran inspiration, but with me playing Age of Empires recently, it's another thing that keeps me in sort of in check, like keeps that fresh in my mind, so to speak. It's just a Marine in a Zealot suit. There you go. Yeah, and the Marine is still in the Marine suit as well. It's the same guy in two suits, just like double masking. He's double suiting. He's ready to go. The other thing too is kind of interesting is that I do like to look at Egyptian iconography and stuff as well for inspiration. However, one of the issues with that is that all of their it feels like a lot of their names are they just don't sound very good on English tongues, right? Like when spoken alongside other things. The same is unfortunately true of the Indian mythology. They've got some banging concepts and really cool like visuals, but like to say the name is to embarrass yourself in public, basically. I guess you'd say this guy is Amenemhat or something. Like that's kind of interesting, but it's still not very like even Khafre or Khafri or however you say that. Like these names are like I think these aren't even gods. These are just like rulers, right? They're pharaohs. Obviously Ramses. Ramses is kind of cool. Maybe Terran Ramses would be interesting. Daedalus. Yeah, I feel like that's almost overused. That and Aeolus. It's because they have that like us ending and then the AE, you know? That those are I see those like all the fucking time. There's something that I keep oh, I think it's Byzantine. There's some like Mesopotamian word that I keep looking at or I keep thinking about in the context of unit names and stuff. I think it is Byzantine. I just or Byzantium or something like crazy, you know. But I don't know what the fuck you would like. You can't really say like Terran Byzantine. I don't really know what that would be. Yeah, Ramses is actually quite powerful. I wasn't looking for pharaoh names before. I was looking for like the names of their actual gods, and you get like Amun Ra and stuff like that. It just doesn't sound very punchy, right? Which is something I'm looking for the tank specifically. Ramses is imposing but not punchy either. Yeah, that's why I went for Asterion for the name of the Minotaur's cannons, the Minotaur's laser. If you're just joining us, we renamed the battlecruiser to Minotaur. Hatshepsut. There's another name for you. Anubis is kind of powerful, but it's also like, yeah, whatever. Everybody's heard of Anubis. Not very like unique in any capacity. Originally, the battlecruiser's weapon was called Minotaur Laser Battery, but obviously I've just changed that a bit. Imagining a zealot and Ecclesias driving a chariot pulled by two simulacrum. Psychosis. Yeah, Hoplite could almost work for like a Protoss unit, I feel like, because you would never get like a Spearman or something for Terrans. The problem is, I've tried to move away from specific historical accounts of Protoss stuff. For the Protoss names, I've tried to go more in the idea of just a role within society, but something that sounds really fantastical, like Ecclesiast or Hierophant, you know? Whereas obviously their ranks were based off of the Romans, I believe. The Executor and the Praetor, which is short for like Praetorian Guard and stuff. Obviously, a Praetor back in the day was back in the Roman days was certainly very famous as far as like a military rank goes. Might even be where they sourced their Templar and Archon stuff, right, from like religious sects of historical past. But I've tried to go for something a little bit more, not necessarily contemporary either, just sounding something that fits like these like really almost overly dramatic, but like overly formal, aliens that are super religious. And Hoplite doesn't have that same like magnificence to it, I suppose. I did have a unit name in my head earlier today, like hours and hours ago. I don't remember what it was though. It began with P, and I was thinking about making it a Protoss unit name, but I can't remember. I'll probably remember it later on. But yeah, I'm not seeing anything that's immediately striking me as like super powerful for the siege tank. I still think Ramses could be a cool name, but it's just not powerful enough. It's not potent. It doesn't just punch you in the face the way that it needs to. Yeah, we need a name that punches you in the face as hard as a siege tank punches your base in the face. So it's pretty much my motivation. Yeah, this is what I do when I'm looking up like names or something. Like I'll usually scroll around like this for a while. You could imagine naming a unit Achilles as well, something like that. Although that is also a little bit like droll, I guess. Like, oh yeah, super original. Terran Trojan has an interesting ring to it, but I don't know what you would actually. What would be a Trojan? Maybe that's a science vessel, Terran Trojan. Oh, what's the name of that River Styx guy? Who I'll just search up Styx. Acheron, right? Oh no, that's in a river. Who's the guy who takes you along the? Oh, Charon, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, the Terran Trojan. That's a good idea, Iron Torch. I didn't think about that one. That's really funny. Naming the dropship Trojan. The problem is most people think about Trojan as like not Troy, but as a virus, so it definitely wouldn't land. It's just not something you would probably want to use in general. But that is really funny. Ah, Orpheus. There's a name. You know, my last time I heard somebody say Orpheus, it was like that cringe anime Warcraft 3 custom campaign I suffered through, where one of the main characters just kept going, Orpheus hungers. That was pretty disgusting. Yeah, but does Charon's boat have a name? That's what I'm looking for. I assume that's even how you say it. Charon. Here we go. Might even be Charon, but I always I thought it was Charon, and then somebody told me it was Karen. Maybe they were pranking me. Don't remind you of that? Why? You don't like what's it called? Anime of the Future? It's not Vision of the Future. The fuck is it? I don't remember. Razor Claw X, dude. What a man. Oh, Wanderers of Sorceria. There you go. I had buried and repressed that fucking memory. What if you come back to this page in like a year and you just read off um the list of like Aeneas, Dionysus, Heracles, Hermes, Odysseus, like you just rattle off all these names and you're like, huh, all of those are units in Hydra. I wonder where Prodigal got his ideas from. Terran Thanatos. People would probably just assume it's like a play on Thanos, unfortunately. Yeah, that would be the real Trojan, right? Just unloads fucking Achmeds in your base. I really enjoyed almost killing Veek's Nexus with like 3 Achmeds in that one map. That's pretty funny. It doesn't look like the boat of Karen actually has a name. That would be a pretty epic name for a dropship, though. You imagine, like, what's our dropship named? It's named after the boat of the guy who ferried people to hell when they died. Oh, we're going to be safe, right? I kind of like that. But Karen, unfortunately, is not like a very powerful name either, so. I still can't believe that in the campaign of Age of Empires, the Greek campaign, you have a siege of Troy or whatever. You defeat them, and then in a fucking exposition dump after map briefing or debriefing, the narrator just narrates the battle, like the Trojan horse aspect of it, instead of you actually embodying it or anything. Like, why? Pretty dumb. Dude, Lakeithos sounds so epic, and it's just a fucking vat of oil. Pretty wild stuff, IMO. Is caravel like another name for caravan or something? Oh, it's a boat. Okay. Yeah, imagine how much more interesting that mission would have been if you have the opening cutscene be that, and then you take command of a small base inside or something. Although it wouldn't really fit the idea of the macro style of the RTS, I guess. But why even have it be a mission at all if you're not even going to actually do it? Yeah, I guess I haven't really looked for like names that aren't related to mythology for this sort of thing. Terran Karak. That's funny. You're a man of war, homie. Yeah, Caravel, Karak. Jong. Cock. Terran Cock. Windjammer. Can't say that. Yeah, Galleon is like super, what do you call it? Like low level, right? It's pretty common. I kind of like Brigantine. Why am I thinking? I'm thinking of like Brigandine. Is that even not a word? What am I thinking? Oh, I'm probably just thinking of brigand, which is like a robber of some sort, right? Oh yeah, bandit. Okay. Terran Arak. There you go. You could name the science vessel Terran Columbus. That would be funny. Oh, the other thing too. Oh, maybe that's what we name the science vessel. Think about how aggressive the science vessel is in Hydra, where it has those two abilities that are pretty much like just for aggro, right? Irradiate and observance. I could see an argument for naming the science vessel a conquistador, because like think about what they did, right? They just conquered a bunch of shit. Maybe there's like a famous conquistador name or something we can use. I guess you could also say Inquisitor, but that's less interesting, I think. Because Conquistador, like, people know what it is. It also is kind of like long and complex, which is fits the idea of it being a specialist. Oh, I didn't even look at the chat. Somebody said Inquisitor. Prank. But yeah, I think Conquistador works pretty well. It is a little, like I said, it's a bit, like it's a lot of syllables, but... Yeah, I'm not sure how many of their ship names are committed to history or documented anywhere. It's also just not going to be as immediately translatable if it's just some like obscure ship name, right? Action verb. Cartographer is the name of a science vessel in my own personal fanfic, aka a campaign plan that I've had for a while. I see some stuff about ships here, but I don't see... Oh, here we go. Maybe. Oh no, these are all island names. Barrio and Caravella Annunciation. Yeah, neither of those are going to work. Oh, Conquistador might be it. I'll commit that as like the initial idea, and if we find something better later, we can iterate on it. I'm not really feeling that one because it's not really about just exploring. What works for the Conquistador is that it's like, if you know what a Conquistador did, it's like a colonizer, right? It's like the idea is that they came in, they fucking conquered your ass, and in HYDRA the science vessel is super aggro. All of its stuff is related to, like, it can paint fucking nuclear strikes for God's sakes. So it's a bit different, a bit more on the powerful side, which is why I think Conquistador works so well. But like I said earlier, a little bit earlier, if we find something better, we can do that. I mean, I guess Conquistador is literally just conqueror in another language, but it has that historical connotation to it, which I think makes it a little bit deeper than just translating a word into another language. So, what does observance do? It tags a unit, and then as long as a vessel remains within a certain amount of range of that unit, their armor continues to be reduced by 1. So their armor is immediately reduced by 1 when you use this, and then it reduces by... let's see. Armor is reduced for every 5 seconds the science vessel remains within 5 weapon range. Armor returns after 5 seconds of no nearby vessels. I think it's to a cap of 5 as well, but I don't think that's listed here. But basically it just tags them, so... Loaded the wrong map, of course. Oops. So here we'll use it. As you can see, pranked. Pranked by my ion cannon. But as you can see, we were able to... The vessel flashes red while it's observing the targets. And they will continue to be like that. I don't think their actual... Yeah, Their armor doesn't get visually displayed as lower on the tooltip, but it is, in fact, getting reduced pretty heavily. Looks like these guys escaped it. But as you can see, I'm doing pretty incredible damage to him. It was like 20 damage or something. Yeah, so maybe there is no cap after all. So you could imagine that's pretty fucking powerful. Requires a lot of positioning, but... show less on what tooltip? You mean the text when you're mousing over it? It is pretty difficult to read right now. I would just like to have it be wider so that you can actually read more of it in a better formatting. But I could probably try to make the tooltip a little bit less complex. Oh, show less armor on the tooltip. Yeah, I think we can eventually add some code for that based on armor end stacks or whatever. If I look at the code for the weapon armor tooltip, it should be possible. This is something that Veek would probably be able to do since he recently refactored all this stuff to add status displays. But if we find armor, is armor display even in here? Yeah, so he would probably have to add it over here somewhere. Yeah, forecastle armor wouldn't be reduced, I don't think. Because the +2 armor is, I think, emulated, in fact. I think it's basically just reducing 2 damage from incoming attacks. But what else did we think about for dropship, though? There was something else. It wasn't Caravel, it was something before that, I think. Oh, no, it was Trojan. Fuck. Yeah, neither of those are going to work. I guess I'll write down my other unit names here in a sec. Somewhere. We had Olympian, Autocrat, Ramses. There was something else too, but I don't remember what it was. Whatever. Think about that later. Oh, I think it was like Copernicus, but it's a bit elaborate, so it's probably fine. All right, I'm going to take a quick break to use the bathroom, and when I come back, we'll probably get more work done on the AI, or maybe we'll just spin around renaming more stuff. We will see. I'm having a good time either way. Hope you guys are too. BRB. Yo. You. You are right about that Iron Torch. I'm not 100% sure about what I would do about the whole drop ship thing. I still have to come up with a name for a more imposing dropship craft. Probably a unit that would have a little bit more than just transport utility. I was thinking of a high tier unit that would come out of maybe the nanite assembly that would transport significantly more than the dropship. They wouldn't have hot drop, but I have a feeling like, yeah, there's probably some arguments for like naming a unit like that along the lines of Trojan. I like the idea of the dropship being considered a bit more on the faster side. Whereas with this other like higher tier transport, you'd probably have that on the slower side. So yeah, I don't know what to make of that actually. Anyway, I was thinking about what we still have to do for the AI. I definitely still need to set up some Terran stuff. For the 12cc stuff, I think this build relies on getting early economic advantages because of the expansion. Definitely wants to pivot towards racks early because it doesn't get delayed by getting a refinery until after it expands, right? And interestingly enough, even after the expansion attempt is successful, we have the refinery and then the supply depot stuff before we turn off the cut worker and can't expand stuff. So that's like to make sure that for like 100% for sure that the AI hasn't had enough time to expand. For the Zerg and for other builds, I'm a little bit less, a little bit more stringent with the rules. Like if you can't expand within this window, just go straight into tech or whatever. So I would say, oh, another thing we need to do is crashed Minotaur, and then just quickly. Oh, here we go. Okay. Now I need to replace all this. Okay. All right, yeah, so that's taken care of. So that means we probably want this AI to spam out quite a few early structures. We'd probably want them to go into barracks over captaincies. Actually, I'm not sure if there's ever really an argument to go lower tier over higher tier. What happens when people look at the context plastic? I assume you mean rubber, the condoms. That is such a shit brand name for condoms. Like you don't want something that you think doesn't have a bunch of men in it to have a bunch of men in it. So why the fuck would you name it Trojan? What is wrong with you? Why? That's like an in joke or something. That's like a satire. So goofy. So goofy. I casted a guy whose name was Goofy today. That was pretty stupid. That didn't work, by the way. Gotta redo it. There we go. All right. I'll say pref bio prod 0 build pref barrack. Oh wait, what is it? Build pref bio barrack. Oh no, it is just build pref barracks. It is bio barracks. It was just the wrong name. Now I'm gonna paranoid and check all of these. All right. Man, there's a ton of like individual small things that I definitely want to do, try to do better at with the AI, but there's like, if I was following every little thing that popped into my head, I'd be jumping around here all day long, all night long. Yeah, so I definitely think we need a little bit more to figure out what we want out of the 12cc build. It's just such a weird build. Like normally you would have more defining characteristics behind it. This one seems to get a decent amount of starports and a relatively early NG bay off of the back of the expansion, which is kind of nice. So I guess we could prioritize. See, the problem is then if that's what you do, surely you prioritize captaincies because you've got the early tech, so you want to like push off of that. So that's how we'll handle that, I think. And then var ex call pref bio heavy 0 build pref bio madcap 13. Is it heavy? Yeah, heavy madcap. Okay, so we've done that. I think that makes sense. Do we want them to build anything in particularly different? I think the madcap, or the early madcap push makes a lot of sense to me. And maybe like maybe medic spam as well. Like maybe they just go for like a really early Maybe we prefer Marine, as a matter of fact. And they just love, like, a lot of units, right? This is the M&M build. If you remember that from from Starcraft 2, actually. The Marine Marauder Medevac. This is Hydra's version of that. Marine Medic Madcap. I think that makes sense. And then we can, for production, right, we can do, like, Bio... Medbay. It would be, and this is like bio add-on. This is bio support, and this is bio standard. So you can kind of see what this system looks like when you're actually writing it in the AI script and the decision making, the reasoning behind what I'm doing. However, the build templates that these are usually pretty, like, I'm removing a lot of like the mandatory queue this unit thing going on, which allows for a little bit more versatility. If somebody did want to set some preferences in map settings or something, they'd be able to say, actually, I want you to go like Cyprian early with this early expand build, right? And so like this kind of opens up more different opportunities. If you want like a fast expand into air, then maybe you do something like this, and then you pref starport, whatever. Although the starports are only competing with nanite assemblies, not other things. But maybe I can change that somehow. I know that they're going to get starports for sure. So the question is, do we want them to be supportive in nature? Like, do we even want them? Do we even want to bother trying to control the preferences at all? I think maybe we can prefer salamanders over wyverns, because one thing that is a little bit rough against this composition, it's not really direct damage. They have that with madcaps. They have that with marines, stimming. I think this composition would probably suck against. Well, the thing is, like, Lachezelisks would do a number on them for obvious reasons. So that kind of makes me want to prefer science vessels over Azazels for the detection and for the irradiate. But I don't think it's enough for me to want to prefer one add-on over the other. So what I'll do is I'll do check for air support, right? Or it's air control. Build pref air control. Hit caps lock air control. Wait, what is it? There we go. 13. And then for munitions, we can do munitions bay, and I think salamander for the AoE. So they have a decent amount of crowd control built into the air branch when that comes online. I don't think we bother preferring one production structure over the other. I think that's probably fine for air and for mech. But for mech, you can definitely do EX call, pref bio, or pref mech. What would we want here? I kind of think we want madrigals as well for the same reason. So we do pref mech salvo, 0, build pref bio. Or maybe, I guess paladins or madrigals is probably fine. So maybe we don't bother with salvo. Maybe instead of bothering with any mech preference, well, we can do Cyclops, right? So we pref mech standard, build pref mech standard, Cyclops 13, and then we do var ex call, pref mech add-on 0, build pref mech salvo yard. That way we just prefer salvo yard, so they'll get more of those. Welcome back, Bellathal. Well, my thinking, Kian, is that they have plenty of direct damage. So the thing is, salamanders are air and ground attackers. And right now, I think a huge weakness of this comp could be overwhelming numbers. It really depends on how many marines and madcaps they build, because I could see an argument for that actually neutralizing a lot of like low HP, high quantity units. Whereas the salamanders might be a little bit less effective against something like that. We might be able to look up like Warhammer names in fantasy or something. Maybe that would work. I'll throw in Wyvern and we can just like audit the performance. But my concern is mostly like air, but I guess you wouldn't get much out of that preference. Like maybe if we're worried about like air or something, we can do pref air standard 0 build pref air standard Gorgon 13, and that can be that. So yeah, I think this is a pretty reasonable setup for this particular build. Like it makes sense to me. I don't think there's any oddities. I think we've also held a decent amount of restraint by not like preferring one kind of production structure or starport add-on where it doesn't make sense. Whereas the one thing you can say is this build's probably a little weak on siege potential, but that's where I'm hoping that a large number of Marines, medics, and madcaps can hopefully essentially like crowbar their way in, just force through sheer numbers into a very defended area or something. Whereas obviously otherwise you'd definitely like siege tanks. But that's why we also have Savoyards for paladins, because the range is not as good as a siege tank, but the damage is better, DPS is better rather, and it's not that far off either. So it should help in a lot of cases. Yeah. That's why I think I see your argument for Wyvern, and I agree with it, because the direct damage that the Wyvern can do is probably more useful to this AI than additional AoE, considering AoE, like mass numbers are not going to be too effective against Marine Medic Madcap. The one thing here is that we're going to have less Heracles and less Apostles, which isn't the biggest of deals because Heracles is already kind of not necessarily outmoded, but not necessary when you have so many like units that can handle large groups with direct damage. The concern I do have though is the lack of apostles and the lack of shamans. Like you're going to see some, but it's not going to be as many. And that's because we're preferring medic for the early game spike. It's made me think that maybe I should restructure the system somewhat to accept changes in and pivots in the build as the game goes on to something that does scale better overall as a comp. But I haven't figured out exactly how I want to do something like that. I think maybe if I had a large number of, for example, if I had like a way to track income a little bit better, I might do something like checking the number of mining bases, which I can do currently. And if it's below a certain obvious number, like if you've got less than 4 mining bases or something like that, then or at certain mining base breakpoints, like if you've got like 5, then you pivot almost completely away from tier 1 units and shit because you should have plenty of money. Something like that, that could work. And there are different breakpoints the preferences get cycled. But I'm not sure. We'll experiment with this system, I suppose, and we'll see where it goes. By Hydra build orders, I assume you mean for like players as well. I think since we're going to be running a 2v2 tournament, it doesn't look like it'll be February because I've gotten like a ton of casting stuff that I have to do. And then that's in the CSGO space. I've got some other stuff that I've been working on for a while in the interview side of things. I've got some videos that I want to get done. Like I'm kind of reintegrating certain pieces of content and things over time in this month. Like last week, I reintegrated a lot of AI work where I was working on some other stuff. This week, I'm reintegrating casting. Last week, I also reintegrated Age of Empires technically, but whatever. That's kind of like neither here nor there. I reintegrated LPs because I also did Genesis Rising. Next week, my goal is to reintegrate map crap ideally, but it depends on how quickly we get things done on the extender side for Hydra, I think. Or stability wise anyway. Because I'm sure most people are going to be making Hydra stuff. That's just how the last couple of map craps have been. And if we still haven't gotten some AI fixes and stuff, like some issues with crashes and whatnot, that will be pretty bad. So I don't want to like have that be there. But yeah, long story short, I don't know when the tutorial or the tournament will go live, but as a way to help lessen the burden of people wanting to like who want to maybe compete in that kind of tournament. Because I'll put up like a small cash prize or something. Not that I think it'll really matter that much, but just the fact that it's there, you might get some like overconfident people from normal Brood War who are like, "Oh yeah, I'll come in here and see what's going on here for money." Maybe it'll drive a little bit of interest just knowing that there's like $50 on the table or something. But yeah, I'm not sure how that'll work out. But I do think that the 2v2 tournament that I have in mind will, like, as a way to drive a little bit more interest, I think it's totally reasonable to make a couple of build order guides, right? And I've got plenty of people who are melee minded on the server right now who have already started to put together some sort of build orders. And as the game state becomes a little bit more stable in terms of I'm not adding a bunch of shit anymore. That'll continue on this month. I'll continue adding some stuff, but it'll be relatively small in the grand scheme of things. It'll become easier to make those build orders consistent, right? Because that's definitely something that I think would be really nice for like learning advantages or learning resources, educational resources for people who are interested in Hydra. So yes, the short answer is I will definitely do some videos on Hydra build orders, or I will be at least encouraging that content. Maybe somebody else does the videos. Like I'm not 100% sure how that'll go. Like I could imagine somebody editing together a very quick like build order video, like, or at least I could imagine how I would want it edited, where I would have like a recording of me playing the game, and as I'm walking through the build order, maybe I like speed up a couple of times here and there, just a little bit to like cut down on like idle time between actions. But I'd be explaining my logic and thought process behind it at the whole time, so I can already see in my mind's eye what a video like that would look like. So it totally makes sense for me to make something like that. Definitely something that I want to continue on doing. That kind of melee focused content to get those kinds of people who are more interested in that kind of gameplay interested in Hydra. The problem is obviously we don't have like matchmaking or anything. We don't have like a ladder. We don't have a competitive, anything really. And we don't really have the map pool either yet. So there's a lot of things that need to slot into place before we can do a tournament properly. But in the meantime, sure, I don't see any reason why I wouldn't want to do something like that. And that's actually one of the advantages of doing these AI things is like, oh yeah, you found a Battletech mech called the Razorback. Is he really annoying? Is he the most annoying mech? Because then it makes sense. Razorback is this lunatic man who like botted his like a pole at some point. his feats are legion, man. His feats are legendary. I forget where he was. I think he's Filipino. So I'm pretty sure he's from the Philippines. He was really difficult to like listen to. He's very grating. He would join in some of the very, very old school fraud nights. And he basically was just like while I was trying to defend my base, he would just say, "Your base is under attack, Pronogo," like a secondary advisor, but way more annoying. Oh, is that real roller skates? That's really funny. Basically, he's just done a lot of embarrassing stuff down the years. He says that he made a map for some contest that Jay Barino is running. If you know Jay Barino, who he is, he's basically a guy who like plays custom content a lot in the RTS space. And so he made a custom Brood War map using his mod as like the backdrop. And it just had a lot of really obvious issues. Like the voice acting, if you can call it that, it's just like text to speech thrown through a million filters, and it's really impossible to hear. Like it destroys me. And that was really embarrassing. There's some obvious issues with like the graphics that just had like, ridiculous bugs, like just in your face issues. And he has some insane Discord message where he's like, "You better vote for my mod because I worked very hard on it," or something. It's just really funny because there was a poll out that Jay Barino put out, like, who do you think won? And I don't even think it was going to be final. I don't even think that would have determined the winner, but he wanted to just know what the community thought. So he puts this poll out, And the poll gets botted to hell with like 1,000 plus votes for Razorback's submission. And like the next nearest one was like 100 votes or something. It's like absolutely ridiculous. It's like low effort, like takes you maybe a couple hours on a weekend to put together submission or whatever. It's absolutely insane. That was really funny. Roller Skates in the Twitch chat let me know that he also just made a bunch of Reddit threads, which is embarrassing to say. He made a bunch of Reddit threads that just copy and pasted ideas from previous versions of Hydra, and like he tried to pass those off as his own. And he was like, "Here's how we can fix StarCraft 2 and make it better." Like that was fucking embarrassing, man. Like what a creature, what an entity. So he makes these Reddit threads and he's like, "What do you guys think of this unit concept?" And it's just one-to-one copied from an old website that had Hydra's ideas on it like a while ago. Like that's fucking insane, man. So that's the loadout on Razorback, man. Yeah, well, he used to like tag me in a bunch of tweets where he would tweet out like, "If you like StarCraft, you'll like Hydra" or something. But it's just a weirdo, you know. Yeah. So that's Razorback. Anyway, the the reason why that's funny is he's just a character, man. He made this big long post a while back about like how he's canceling his mod because he lost motivation or whatever. No, no, I banned him from my Discord server like years ago now, I think, maybe a year and a half ago or whatever, because he just wouldn't take a hint. Like I kept telling him like you got to stop being like ridiculous. This is before I found out like all the stuff that he was copying and pasting and whatever. But I don't think he was doing that at this time. This is like most of the stuff that I just referenced happened like within the last calendar year, whereas he's been banned for at least 2 years, I think. So yeah, he's just one of those characters that makes like he just reduces the quality of life for everybody. Like anybody who's like in the voice chat with him is like groaning. Everybody who's like responding to his messages is like fuck. You know, you just can't keep people around like that, you know? Especially since they just if they don't like shape up their attitude and improve given a lot of time and warnings, that this doesn't make any sense. So thankfully we haven't had to deal with people like that too often, but that is just one of those awkward things. I don't know how much of it was language barrier either. Like maybe the guy just didn't get nuances of conversation, which is why I tried to be more straightforward with him, even though it sounded mean as fuck. I was like, listen, if you don't stop acting like an idiot, you will be banned. Because I didn't know how else to say it because he wasn't reading the room properly at all. Oh, okay. Good to know. Yeah, I think it's more a personality conflict or personality flaw or whatever you want. Character flaw. That's it. I think it's more that than a language barrier thing. But giving him the benefit of the doubt, which he probably doesn't deserve, considering he fucking botted a poll in his favor, and, and then just like plagiarized ideas. I don't like personally. I don't even think like, especially since a lot of the ideas that he copy and pasted, they weren't even in use in Hydra. Like I'm fine if you use those in your own creative work. I'm fine if you take a unit that's currently active in Hydra and just copy and paste it into your StarCraft mod, or like take a similar mechanic and implement it, right? Like I don't personally care because maybe that works and maybe that makes your mod higher quality. And if there's more higher quality mods, then there's better stuff for me to play. So like it's a net positive at the end of the day. I'd appreciate like credit or whatever if you actually did whole cloth copy my idea or were inspired by it or something. That's fine. But like even that's like optional, right? It's just like good manners, so to speak. Like I don't even care that he did that. The problem is that he didn't make any content with it. He just posted a bunch of shit to like low effort posts on Reddit and just copy and pasted like documentation from my website and thought that was reasonable. Like, what are you even doing? What are you doing? It's also really funny that he was trying to pitch it as like fixing StarCraft 2 or whatever, because so many of the ideas that I've had for Hydra have gone completely the opposite way. Like, okay, here's the idea is like I've gone away from the automation that StarCraft 2 pushed and the chores that StarCraft 2 pushed, right? I've tried to make it more about like impactful decision making and larger scale battles and stuff. So a lot of my unit concepts and in the past upgrade concepts and stuff like that, of course they fly in the face of what would make sense within StarCraft 2. So it doesn't even make sense. It's not even like he's trying to like pass off the ideas as like ideas for improving Brood War. It's just, which would be a more consistently like close game state to what Hydra has. So it's really goofy. You always feel really bad if you have similar mechanics or tech tree ideas as I do. But sometimes it just ends up that way regardless. Yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal, you know. I think like especially if there's a limited pool of people working within a space. Like for those who don't know, Lollerskate's working on a StarCraft 2 conversion. He's actually trying to fix StarCraft 2 Iron Torch, if you can believe that. But he's got like a ton of his own custom tech tree ideas and stuff. I haven't actually played his content because I don't even know if it's publicated anywhere right now. It's probably just like a small Discord community from what I remember. And I'm not installing StarCraft 2, obviously. So that's like that hasn't happened. But from the ideas that he's given me and the stuff that we've talked about in previous streams, it's very interesting that like him and I are both working on like these expansive tech tree change mods for different games, obviously. So obviously when you have that kind of thing going on, and there's like not too many people who are trying to make like total conversion level changes to Brood War or to StarCraft 2 or to any RTS, really. It's like a very mammoth undertaking, right? So you wouldn't expect that too many people would be doing that. You're bound to like share some ideas, especially if you're actually talking with these people, right? So I don't really think it's that big of a deal. Like I've told Icor the same thing. If he thinks there's like a fun unit concept, like he took the Southpaw from Hydra to use in his own mod. I think it was the Southpaw. I think he also took the Paladin or something like that. You know, like these are like, okay, yeah, you've got these units and they've got placeholder level graphics, obviously, because it's not like I'm a modeler. But, you know, that eventually they'll be better. And until then, you've got like this, if you've got this complete unit setup that you could copy and paste into your own mod for Brood War. So like it totally makes sense if it's a unit concept that you think improves your game state. Like I don't really mind that. I think it's totally fine. Right, yeah. I haven't really bothered too much with the custom writing side of things just because like for me to get super motivated to do something like that, I actually have to design a campaign, which is actually what I'm going to be doing pretty soon. So it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. I don't know if you've seen the YouTube polls, roller skates. I've been becoming poll no-go. I've done a poll every day for a while. Let me see if I can find some shit here to show you while I'm talking shit. Only one vote and it's for you. So yeah, 6 days ago I did my first poll, and then I was talking about like what would people want the most, and I threw in like a bunch of different options. People voted for campaigns or scenarios / campaigns. So then I said, well, let's get more specific. So I gave like a bunch of different options. Overwhelming majority people were interested in original campaigns that are pretty long, on the longer side. I posted a screenshot of the permacloak changes. And I said, oh yeah, this is the Age of Empires poll where I didn't have a poll, so I just wrote that. And then there was, oh yeah, then I was asking like the format of the campaign, and then I was asking the race of the campaign. The race is actually drawn a little bit closer now. Now that it's been 2 days or almost 2 days. Oh no, a little bit over 2 days now, I think. This is interesting because before it was like much more for Protoss than for Terran Reserve. So maybe this changes as time goes on, in which case my ideas get called into question. But that's pretty funny. And then people overwhelmingly want mod streams. So whoever voted for Don't Spoil Me, Dad, should just ignore the streams then, basically, which is fine. What do you mean by diverging? Oh, diverging heavily from the writing, right? Yeah, so that's my next point is because it's going to be Protoss, but also because I want to do some really crazy shit with the lore. And so it's not even with the lore. I've already had these ideas for Protoss where I'm not sure how obvious it is just from like some flavor text in the tooltips and stuff. It's probably a little bit more obvious to you, Lola Shades, because I think we've talked about this in the past. But for example, we have like Sanctum of Sorrow, and it unlocks 2 specific units, the Augur and the Pariah. A big focus going into this campaign is going to be adding a lot of unit responses and stuff to all of the units that are missing it right now. So, like, I added unit responses for the Ecclesiast and the Madcap somewhat recently. And interestingly, the Pariah, for example, right? The unit lore that I have in mind, like the fantasy of the unit, so to speak, or the background of the unit, is that there's this very brutal, like tragic operation that gets undergone where a Protoss warrior will be like essentially like undergo this process of becoming mechanized in some capacity, where like parts of him are replaced with machine parts and stuff like that. And there's he's like both psychically, mentally, and physically being essentially like ripped in two, where there's a part of him that is being used almost as fuel for a war machine. And it's almost like if a Dragoon wasn't powered by like some internal power source, but instead was powered like it was like it's like the man is powering the machine in a Dragoon's case, the Protoss is powering the machine. It's like the inverse of that. If the machine was powered by the man, and you're almost like trapped in this fucking horrifying shell, and your own unit, your Protoss life force is being used as the fuel for the machine, right? Like that's the battery in a way, a living battery. So it's not just like a cyborg, like Balefal points out. It's not just this like union of Protoss flesh and Protoss machine, but it's literally like, in order for this combination to work, you must suffer and be torn asunder over time. So it's not really souls either, but it's something similar to that, right? So like that, just that concept for a unit is so like especially for the Protoss culture, it's like profane, it's heretical. Like how could you possibly subject a Protoss to this? And that's why it's such a high tier unit. It's also quite powerful, right? But it comes at great cost in the lore, so to speak, right? And that's what I want the fantasy of the unit to actually be capitalized upon. So when you hear the unit responses, it's almost like the machine is stealing the voice from the unit itself. That's kind of what I want there to be. So it's like the machine is the dominant voice, and then the screaming pain in the background is voicing the same line, but it's like quiet or muffled almost, or something like that. Like that's kind of the vision I have in my head of what it would end up sounding like. So when the Protoss speaks, it's like his voice is like it's like screams of pain for whatever the unit line is. As his like near lifeless corpse almost is being puppeted by this machine and forced to speak, but like the machine's voice is more dominant through it, or something like that. I haven't like, again, this is like a rough concept in my head. I haven't committed anything down, but that's kind of what I've thought about, is like that kind of unit. And that's obviously like, that's a form of custom writing, is like the unit itself, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily that I'm writing like a custom campaign or something. But when I'm able to deliver upon unit roles and unit fantasies based on the unit responses, ideally the portraits and custom graphics as well, but those are a little bit like, I am a little bit more limited in that sense, right? I can't just like tell somebody to model all this shit for me and have it done in a reasonable time frame. So the placeholder graphics are determining to what extent I can present certain ideas. And when you have a unit like what the Pariah ultimately is, which is again this like tortured soul, almost like this lifeless or near lifeless Protoss life form that has been butchered and brutally fused with a machine to fuel the machine, that I think is really quite a unique concept for StarCraft. It's not something that you see very often or at all in like StarCraft content, first party or otherwise. So I think it'll leave an impression. The fact that it's quite a powerful unit will make it leave an impression. And the fact that it'll have like those unit responses like we talked about, where the machine is stealing the voice in a way, right? Like the screams of pain are muffled by the machine's voice, and that's sort of like how I'm conceptualizing it. That's going to give you a very different impression of what the Pariah ultimately is, instead of it just being this sort of like silent hulking monstrosity that you see currently in the game. When you see it more in action later on, and it has all of those unit responses and stuff, I think that will push it in the right direction for what I kind of want the setting to feel like viscerally. And that's the same thing for the Demiurge. The Demiurge is a unit that I haven't yet implemented, mostly because I don't have a unit graphic for it yet. I keep trying to extract shit from Warhammer 40k and reskin it, but it doesn't end up very well, unfortunately. So hopefully we can get to the bottom of that. But this Demiurge unit is like literally the most OP unit I've ever even heard of or conceptualized, where you have the worship passive, right? When a Demiurge strikes a target with less than half HP, the target is assimilated, permanently transferring ownership to the Demiurge's owner. Well, it says permanently, but if the Demiurge dies, the unit returns, right? So there is still some counterplay there. But like that's an incredibly powerful unit. Like you can't just like have that as a unit idea. Like that's almost like ridiculous to conceptualize. But at the scale of Hydra, like what is one unit at the high tier if it can't destroy entire armies or assimilate entire armies or something? So I did mention that the original Pariah, the original unit named Pariah, was supposed to have like some sort of charming ability, but I wasn't yet 100% sure what it was going to be. I really like that this unit is now like fully mechanized, though. Like this is a full like artificial intelligence created by Protoss, and the idea that it has this ability to manipulate the like the will of a machine or the will of a man or the will of a Zerg or whatever. Once they are sufficiently weak, I think is quite interesting. So it's not something that you normally see, obviously. Like this is a really cool unit idea, in my opinion. Certainly quite epic level in terms of the tech that's required, in terms of the level of power that you're getting out of it. Like it's just unheard of, basically. And that's something that I think will be really interesting when we finally get to the point where that's implemented, when we finally have a graphic for it, and when we finally get to the point where like we get the AI to use it well, we get like players are adapting to it in that sense. And that's delivering on a unit fantasy that I think a lot of people would normally assume like, oh, if I use a mind tyrant, formerly known as Dark Archon, and mind control a hero unit, and that will unlock an enemy AI or an allied AI for me or something in this campaign mission. Like most people would normally conceptualize it like that. Hydra gives you the opportunity to live out that kind of fantasy of dominating mentally, of course, your opponents into being an ally. You can literally do that in any capacity if you tech into this particular unit. That's what makes it so exciting to me personally, is that you have this capacity for controlling an entire enemy force if you want, right? Like if you can protect the Demiurge after taking control of all of these units, right? Like that's really the way that it works. So I think that's it. It's just one of those things that obviously you don't see too often. It has the potential to be really busted. I don't really know what I'll do about that if that ends up being the case. Certainly want to have some counterplay to it, but I also want it to live out this fantasy that like normally you would never see something like this. So. Well, it's funny you say that, Iron Torch, because since the polls have decided that Pol Nogo will be working on a Protoss campaign. My thoughts were that there would be a Demiurge that's controlled whoever you are as the protagonist, or whoever you're following as the protagonist, and then maybe as the apex of the story or something, the Demiurge is slain and you are released from your bondage in that sense. And then it's almost like you're reinforcing the story framing with the actual mechanics of the game. Like maybe because you're playing as Protoss, you yourself trained other Demiurges and enslaved other groups of units or whatever, right? Like you enslaved a drone and start playing as Zerg or whatever. Like maybe your allied AI does that at some point or something, right? And that's actually another one of the ways that I'm like, again, this is just a concept and it's just a consideration. I can't say that it's confirmed as like 100% what the plot will be about. But that opens up so many interesting ideas for like, maybe there's like this second or third mission into the campaign where you walk into like you open up the mission, right? And you're outnumbered initially, and it's you and your Protoss ally that you've played the last couple maps with. And then the Demiurge overlord of you, like this master of you, is like, make way for my newest apprentice or something. Whatever the I don't know exactly know how the demiurge would talk either. I haven't fully figured out what the demiurge unit responses would sound like, for example. But it would be something like that, right? He would say something like to that effect, and then maybe like a Zerg brood starts like some Zerg drones on borrow from a cave or something and start setting up a base. And it's like, oh shit, like he enslaved the Zerg brood in the last mission or something. Like there could be so many different cool things that you could do with a unit concept like that if you extrapolate it out towards the narrative, and then it still makes sense. Like it makes sense. It's grounded in the gameplay. So it's not just some weird abstract story framing that is completely removed from the experience you have while playing the game. You just straight up can do the same thing that he's doing to you to other people. Like if you want to do that, if you want to go down that route. So yes, I would agree that Protoss would do that. However, the Demiurge is not Protoss. It's an AI built by Protoss, and it's clearly fucking profane and heretical technology. That's another thing. I think in my version of the Protoss, so to speak, I would lean super heavily into the idea that the higher tier the tech, the more somber it is, which is why the Star Sovereign is this ship that, like, its main ability, I don't know if you've even seen this, Iron Torch, but its main ability where it glasses an entire region of territory and basically it guarantees annihilation of any unit or structure that it's over is called the Grief of All Gods, because it's like they enter into a period of mourning as a species when they have to use a ship like that. Like that's kind of the scale I'm getting at, is like this isn't just this isolated skirmish or whatever. If the Protoss have to break out the Star Sovereigns, shit's serious. That's kind of what I want to get at thematically when you see stuff like that. That's why it was so cool when I was watching the AI fight it out earlier, and the Terran AI were dealing with the swarming personality of Zerg that didn't really tech up too heavily, too quickly. They just focused on early game units. The Terran AI were able to riposte and long enough to get their fleets out, and they had the Minotaurs, formerly battle cruisers. They had the Centaurs. They had the Phoboses. They had the Penumbras. They had all these like high tier units, and they were able to drive the Zerg back with just like maybe 20 of those units. And it's like thousands of Zerg died in that one map. And like not even 1,020, like multiple thousands of Zerg died in that one map. I guarantee you. I didn't look at the score screen afterwards, but I guarantee you it was a lot. And comparatively, the Terrans maybe lost like a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 units max, because they deferred to high tier tech stuff. Like that kind of narrative that you can draw out from that game is so powerful, and something you don't get in most RTS games. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards, is like, we want the story to be told by the gameplay experience. Sure, we can have dialogue, and we can have like opening cutscenes and briefings and closing cutscenes in some cases, but the gameplay experience should be uninterrupted while still telling a story unto itself without relying on long dialogue scenes or anything like that. The dialogue in the middle of a mission should be super quick. Maybe it's your ally telling you that you better be on watch. I'm expanding. I'm teching up. Can you cover me while I do something like this? Something small and short like that. Or I'm going to march on this player. Feel free to join me. Something like that, right? Like, just information that you can actually plan around, right? And it's your ally sending this transmission in specific manners that are going to sort of accentuate certain characteristics of what this character has. Like if it's a really aggressive player, if it's a really aggressive commander, then maybe he's not very, very talkative. Maybe he's very snappy and he's like, cover my ass while I expand. Maybe that's how he delivers the line. Whereas if he's a bit more of a conservative player, or he's just the way that his personality is, he's not that interested in being super aggressive, or maybe he's even a little unconfident because he's a recent recruit to the army or something, right? Like he's a recent lieutenant or a recent appointee. He might be like, I think I got to expand here, man. Can you cover me? Something like that might be a little bit more appropriate based on that. So we can still have dialogue that colors your understanding of a character, but it can mostly be about what's actually happening in the game, maybe a bit reactionary to what your opponents are doing. Meanwhile, the core of the story is what the player is experiencing when they play against or as or alongside certain characters and certain factions. And when you see those Star Sovereigns come out in the mid game or the late game or whatever, and you're fighting against Protoss, then it doesn't necessarily follow that you have to understand, after this mission, the Protoss will be very sad because they had to glass the planet. That's not really going to be on your mind, obviously. I don't have any illusions about that. It's going to be really cool, though, when you see these Protoss AI start dropping these Star Sovereigns around the field and glassing entire bases and stuff, though. Like, that's going to be really cool in a thematic way and like frightening, and you might be a little shook after that. You might be like, holy shit, they're killing me, you know? Like, so the long and short of it is we are leaning a little bit more towards the tech personifying certain aspects of the race's power fantasy or lore. And when you see things that you normally would say, that's too profane and disgusting for Protoss, I think understanding where it's actually coming from is going to be super helpful in that. So when it's a demiurge and it's just an AI, like all of the robotics branch units is considered profane by a lot of Protoss because it's just you're using robots instead of like it's not like the Envoy or the Witness or the Probe where these are robotic support craft. You're actually using robotic units, robotic entities, artificial intelligence to wage war, which is seen as dishonorable in their culture. At least that's sort of my current fanfic, if you will. And as a result of that, of course, that's going to land you in a bit of hot water. Even if you need to rely on them in the early game or something just to supplant it, it's like a desperate move almost for most culturally Protoss, people or whatever. And you get some heretics down the lines. It's even seen a little heretical to use pariahs, as we talked about earlier, mind tyrants, formerly known as Dark Archons. It's really sad when you've got to use Archons or Augurs because you're sacrificing some of your most legendary people, like the Templar, obviously, in order to have a very short-lived period of power. And it's almost like sad, just like the Star Sovereign is sad when you have that aspect to it. So that's one of those cases where I think we can work very well with the tech tree and the unit roles and the unit fantasies. We can have a lot of that contribute very heavily towards telling a story that the player experiences rather than simply passively accepts and eats up. And that's what a lot of it is like a lot of the stories in games are just not very engaging. Somehow they've made it so that games themselves are boring with the story anyway. And you're almost like, shut up. Let's get on with this stupid story that I don't care about so I can go back to playing the game. I want to combine the two as games really should be. And that's like how you do it in RTS, as far as I'm concerned, is you make the game tell a story as it's being played by all parties. And that includes the AI. So hopefully that explained it anyway. I know it was a bit of a rant and I went on a lot of side tangents. Claymore is an interesting one. Isn't Claymore like an explosive? Or does it have other etymology? I saw anime in my search. Oh, Claymore was sword. That's right. I forgot about that. Oh, another thing I meant to say earlier when I was talking about Protoss, when Iron Torch was talking about like, wouldn't Zerg be like too disgusting or whatever? The more like goofy thing that I could say about that is yes, but I still want you to be able to play with Zerg as Protoss. Like that's obviously not a very legitimate reasoning, but like that is something that I think is a valuable gameplay experience. Like basically allowing you to have like you have the ability to experience a story in 2v2 matchmaking or 2v2 AI with your co-op buddy or single player, but you're playing with an AI ally against another two people. So you have that experience. I still think that should tell a story by itself, even if you're a Protoss playing with Zerg, even in something that might not seem that like to make much sense or whatever. So I don't mind going out into crazy territory or territory that's just not very well explored in other capacities. I think it's kind of cool. But I will say there's another thing that people who are fans of StarCraft content, custom content, first party content, fans of StarCraft, or just people who are aficionados, even if they're not super like, diehard fans or whatever, in terms of like, maybe they don't like the content, but they know a lot about it, which is, I guess, where I would be. A a lot of your base assumptions as somebody like that are going to be about like, oh, if you're making a Protoss campaign, it's probably about Protoss from Ire or something like that. Whereas I want the scale to be so much higher than just one planet. Like in the Brood War campaign in StarCraft 1, losing Ire was basically like a death knell for the Protoss species. And that's why they were so fucking sad about it. And it was really bad for them, like in the real world as well. It wasn't just like a Pyrrhic or not Pyrrhic victory. It wasn't just that they lost like a symbol of their heritage and homeworld. It was actually very bad strategically. They lost a lot of production. I think they also lost, like, the books established a bunch of extra stupid lore. Like, they lost the only Dragoon production plants and they didn't know how to make new ones or something stupid like that. That was pretty embarrassing. That's why Immortals are there instead of Dragoons. And then, of course, Legacy of the Void Wreck on that. But, what was I going to say from that? In my idea of what the setting of my stories would be in, you wouldn't have just one planet have that level of significance almost ever. Like if your one planet is that significant, then you've already lost the galactic war because you should never be reduced to just one planet. So we're talking more on the sense of Warhammer 40,000 in terms of the scale of the battles that would be happening. So you would basically have like that's why I said when I was talking about like thousands of Zerg dying in a single battle, like that's unheard of in StarCraft in terms of scale. Besides that one StarCraft 2 mission where they just exposited you that Amon was was entering billions of Zerg onto the, like, it's just so stupid. I can't believe that was a real thing. But like besides that, like you'd never see like thousands of units dying in a single battle. Almost never in Brood War at least. Right? In StarCraft 2 maybe it's a little bit more common actually. But I want to tap into that kind of thing more. That was a 1v1, 1 versus 1 in HYDRA, and it was just like a casual 1v1 that I was watching unfold while doing AI testing. It wasn't even like a particularly high stakes or large scale map. There were 10 bases across the whole map, so both players are on 5 bases and both players are throwing as many units as they can at each other and stuff. Yeah, 1.5 billion Zerg. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, it's like wait until 2 billion to unlock the secret ending of this cutscene or whatever. It was like some objective. So stupid. But yeah, so that was pretty stupid. That just the scale is completely off there. I unironically want to see an end game score screen where it says 1 billion units slain across all players or whatever. Like that would be fucking epic if you actually lost like millions of units, and and it took that many units to die in order for the mission to be over. Like that's the kind of grueling multi-hour, not slog again. Like I would want it to be actually earned. I wouldn't want it to just be like, well, you've got to kill like 1 million pre-placed units. Like I would just want the AI to be good enough that it can occupy your time for that long, and threaten you for that long, and make you actually work for it. That's the kind of story that I want to tell of that scale. I want to earn what StarCraft 2 is trying to very cheaply get by just telling you that through some text that there's 1.5 billion Zerg on the planet. Instead of showing you anything, I want to actually force you to like contend with an army of that size. That would be fucking cool. So that's sort of where I'm coming at it from. And as a result of that scale being so high, there's going to be Protoss that are heretics that are led or like a runaway experiment demiurge that's enslaved like an entire fucking population or tribe of Protoss or something. Like that's thinkable. That is understandable, or it's not necessarily expected. But when you understand how a demiurge works in game, you can extrapolate that to what if he did start, attacking Protoss leadership until they were below 50% health and then stealing their fucking, like making them worship them or whatever. Like, that makes sense almost, right? Like you can understand how it would happen. It's believable when you understand how the unit works. And when they're led by a demiurge, when they're led by a fucking runaway AI, rogue AI, then the idea of the rogue AI using whatever tools they have at their disposal to find success makes complete sense. Yeah, that's the real Project Hydra, is when you cut off a head, 2 more take its place. Well, it looks like that'll do it for our stream. We didn't end up getting too much in here, but I do like the Claymore idea. I think this is pretty cool. I'm not sure if I would The Claymore almost sounds, because it's a weapon, it almost makes me think, oh yeah, this is the Claymore cannon or something. Like that would be the name for the siege tank's weapon, not the tank itself. But I'll think more on this, Balethal. This is a good suggestion because it's got that power, that punchiness, the two syllables. They're very harsh the way that they exist. Like the actual word is very powerful. So I'm gonna look into stuff like that similar to this and see if I can find anything else that feels as powerful in that sense. So I appreciate you suggesting this for sure. But I'm not sure if I like it for the unit. I still think it has potential. Yeah, Hammerhead is a little too on the nose for me about the battlecruiser. TBH. It simply fights Zerg on an infinite map until you lose. I kind of like that as an idea for a game mode, though, or a UMS map or something like. How many Zerg broods did you kill? That's ridiculous. So yeah, this was a really fun stream though, even though we didn't necessarily get a huge amount of work done per se. It was really fun to talk about this stuff. Got me in the right headspace to work on some more creative concepts like renaming units and whatnot. So I'm quite happy with that. And I really enjoyed talking with you guys about stuff. It was very impromptu. I didn't necessarily think about like all of the ideas beforehand or whatever. Rename battle cruiser. I think that it worked out pretty well, though. I'm quite happy with that. So I hope you guys will join me for whenever the next one is. I still think that the next, the next Age of Empires stream is going to be in a couple days. That'll be Thursday. Tomorrow I'm casting again, so maybe you will see me again for another one of these mod streams. I don't know, but probably not. I won't make any promises. I'll put it to you that way. Just keep it in the hours I'm awake. Yeah. Maybe you should change your sleep schedule just to watch my streams. How about that, homie? That is ridiculous. All right. I will catch you guys very soon, though. Thanks, everybody who tuned in and helped out with the ideas. Appreciate you guys. Balethal Kia and Iron Torch Roller Skates. Luciferius was here for a second. And I think somebody else was, too. Terran Dominion said hi and then didn't say anything else. So, yeah. You all know who you are. Wave emoji.